How's it going, everybody? I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our off-season The Hurricane Hub discussion for Saturday, as always, December 17th, 2022. Let's get right on with our discussion for today. First, starting off with a look. If you're not familiar with this page, this is the CIMSS, the TC web page. This is from the Cooperative Institution of Meteorological Satellite Studies, and this is actually from the University of Wisconsin, I think, as it says on the top here. And this is their webpage, and this is actually the webpage I use for a lot of resources that you see, such as the wind shear. When I bring that up in the 850 millibar vorticity, I actually do get it from this webpage right here. So this is indeed a very useful webpage, and on the home sort of section of the page, you notice that there's a storm coverage sort of map that shows what is going on actively in the world. And something you do notice is how there isn't really much going on, except of course this invest area of 98S. This is of course in the southern hemisphere, as if you don't know, it is their summer right now, so of course it is their time for tropical cyclones, like it is here for us in June, July, August, and September, especially in the northern hemisphere. For us here in the northern hemisphere, when our summer is, that's when we really see the most amount of tropical cyclone activity, and that's what's going on right now in the south there. And as a result, we do have something to watch there, although I'm assuming it's not really something big, at least for right now. But overall, it is December, so of course things will be mostly quiet, as the main basins that we usually look for are usually quiet this time of year. So of course that goes to show nothing is really of a threat right now. And if we take a look across the Atlantic, you could also see that as well. Strong upper level winds noted by these upper level clouds moving strongly in the easterly direction coming out of the west. That is indicative of strong upper level winds. And you could also take a look at the Gulf of Mexico too, where that is most evident. And basically anywhere in the Atlantic, you could look here, you see those strong upper level winds moving. And then you see up here in the Gulf of Mexico, you see that the same way too. And also down here in the MDR, where we have a bunch of these small scattered clouds, you do see quite strong upper level cloud action indicative of westerly shear, which is why, especially in December, is especially why we do not see activity this time of year, because besides the upper level winds, you could also see out here very clear almost. We don't have really this deep convective activity going on spot really across the tropical Atlantic, so that does show a lack of moisture too, which is why we don't see activity in December usually, and which is why we do have a hurricane season boundaries, which is of course from June 1st to June 30th. But other than that, nothing much to see on this map. Onto the sea surface temperature anomalies. We do see across the Atlantic and the Pacific more of the same we've been talking about in recent weeks. Very warm off the African coast, and usually people would talk about it and raise some questions about how the hurricane season might evolve, especially with it being pretty darn warm off the coast of Africa. But we do need to keep in mind that is only December, so this could very much change, and this could very much evolve and become something different, especially as we go towards April and May. So this is really not really important to wonder about right now for the tropics. But if we want to look at something that would matter right now, we could look at the Gulf of Mexico, and we can see that that is very warm, and this is especially important when it comes to severe weather, because if the water is warm, that means there's a lot of energy in the atmosphere, because water, and I said this multiple times before, but water retains heat and latent heat in the atmosphere. So if you really want to see where it is warm and where there's a lot of heat and instability in the atmosphere, water temperatures are a pretty good way of looking at that. And we can see that there's a lot of that in the Gulf of Mexico, So when it comes to situations, especially like winter storms or spring severe weather events, a lot of the times they really feed off the Gulf of Mexico for energy, especially those big winter storms, that come from the West Coast. They dip down into the Gulf of Mexico and end up becoming these huge East Coast nor'easters. They really sometimes do feed off the Gulf of Mexico for energy, and especially those severe weather outbreaks that we see, um, especially focused in Dixie Alley, but sometimes the plains too. They feed in energy from the Gulf of Mexico as well to help power the instability for these severe weather outbreaks. So the fact that it is really warm and it has been well above normal for a long time, this is really something interesting that we'll be watching very closely. And of course, as we get towards hurricane season, if this is a persistent factor too, we'll be watching that as well. And off the northern Atlantic here, off the northeast coast of the United States and the Canadian Maritimes, also very warm too. Really sign of a lot of energy still remaining in the Atlantic even into December. And then looking into the Eastern Pacific as we go towards December with the La Nina, as very noted by all these cooler anomalies here. La Nina is still persistent and still very much a factor. And another way I actually really like looking at La Nina and the sea surface temperature anomalies is looking at the CDAS. With this is a method. If you want to know what CDAS means, it's basically a method that is used sort of meteorological, like sort of something to do with climate, like a method of climate that is used to average out data for the general climate. And that's what they have here for the ENSO and the sea surface temperature anomalies across the ENSO region. The Nino 3.4 region, which is where we do look for, especially when it comes to ENSO events, that's the value area that we look at the most. And one thing we do notice is the persistent anomalies below the negative zero point 0.5 line, which is what we consider the threshold for La Nina. And notice how that's been persistent below that threshold all the way since September. So that is really a sign that the La Nina that we have right now has been pretty much a persistent factor for as long as we've known it, and it doesn't seem like it really has been kind of letting down, if you will. Maybe a little bit as we look at the SOI. That's another thing that I like to look at when it comes to these ENSO things. The SOI values have, especially in the last few weeks, been above 8 points. And as I did talk about before, the rule of thumb for the SOI is 7 points above, and the atmosphere is considered to be in a solid La Nina state. And notice how we've been basically for a good deal of the past 30 days, which is what this average is. This is data from on November 18th, which was 30 days ago. Notice how we do see that most of the data shows we've been basically around the 7 point line or above it for basically a good majority of the last 30 days. We have dug down a little bit, and we did actually see a little bit of weakening with the La Nina as of recently, but still, um, it's still in La Nina territory. It's still there, and for as long as the SOI will remain positive the way it is, the longer the La Nina will stick, even though, as we do know, climate models do show the La Nina potentially weakening, especially as we get towards roughly January or February. So, but for now, La Nina is here. As we look at not only La Nina, but there's also other areas we could look at the sea surface temperatures for. This is the Gulf of Mexico. Just to really quickly look at it, and very interesting that I do find, and obviously this is a symptom of the sea surface temperature anomalies being well above normal in the Gulf of Mexico. You do notice how the 26 degrees Celsius line, and I find this interesting especially because that does show that there really still is a lot of heat in the atmosphere in the Gulf of Mexico. Notice how the 26-degree line extends pretty deeply into the central Gulf Coast, and even as we get closer towards the northern Gulf Coast as well. Look at how not far that is from the Florida Panhandle that we have this pocket of 26 degrees Celsius sticking in there, which is really, in my opinion, a sign that the Gulf of Mexico has a lot of energy, and this will really be interesting to see how this progresses too. And off the east coast as well, this is the Gulf Stream, and we see that the 26 degrees Celsius line is roughly in here, but even extending beyond that, this is the 25 degrees Celsius line, which is roughly this thing right here, and up to here. That still goes all the way up the Carolinas coast and goes just off the mid-Atlantic coastline. And if we look back at the sea surface temperature anomalies off the mid-Atlantic coast and the east coast, notice how they're well above normal too. So I really do find it interesting that this part two has also been well above normal and has still remained very warm throughout the winter. And as we go towards hurricane season, we gotta watch and see how this, evolves. Because the more this evolves and the longer this sticks around, it'll really show how much energy there is for potential storms if they do go in this area, especially for the potential that storms might have for intensification, especially closer to the coast. So anything relating to the Gulf Stream, and of course the waters being warm there, especially how they persist throughout the winter, will indeed be interesting, and we'll be watching that very closely. Moving on from hurricane season talk and moving more or less towards severe weather, which has been the common thing that we've been seeing lately. This is just a real quick review of the SPC filtered storm reports. I think this was from earlier this week. I think I'm trying to guess like Tuesday or Wednesday that we saw this severe weather outbreak that happened across the South. And one thing you do notice is a lot of red dots in here, which is indicative of tornado reports. It was a very active tornado outbreak that occurred in the southeast too. This was for December 13th. Quite a few intense tornadoes happened. EF2s, and I think one EF3 as well. There was a SPC, and this is the day for December 14th, which I think was Wednesday. And notice how there's a lot of dots too that are red, which indicates that there's been quite a bit of tornado reports too. So just to review, we did have a pretty active severe weather outbreak just this past week. And I guess this is a sign, this is a symptom of the energy that is still there in the Gulf of Mexico. I think this really was important for fueling this event. And going forward, if we do notice here in the Storm Prediction Center, luckily for the next few days, we really don't have much to talk about that's really that important. Day two, this is the outlook. A little bit of thunderstorms forecast, but nothing severe that's taking shape in day three as well. As we look towards day 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and 8, let's wait for it to load. Nothing really forecasted by the SPC, which is indicative that there is indeed not much going on in the next few days. It is December, of course, so not really something that we will be talking about when it comes to severe weather. That is more of a March, April, May thing. If you do know how severe weather works, that is when we especially look for severe weather. But since it is December, it is winter storm season, and it is a time where everybody is talking about winter. And there's been a lot of talk about how we might have a pattern change to a much colder look for most of the eastern United States, and indeed a much more stormy look for potential winter storms too. And just a reflection of that is by the EPS. This is their mean 2-meter temperature anomaly from the Christmas time period, which is where everybody's talking about the potential for something to try to materialize along the East Coast. And I think this does line up pretty well with what everybody is saying. The EPS mean does indeed indicate a lot of cold air, noted by these blues and these purples in here as well, noting a lot of very cold air seeping in from the north. And this is associated with the general pattern change that everybody's looking for and potentially looking to possibly help materialize something along the East Coast relating to snow, and also along the southeast too. Though it's a little far out, this has been something everybody's been talking about recently, and the models do show quite a bit of cold air that will be in place, which should help anything that does try to materialize. So it will be interesting to see what exactly does happen. It is a little bit far out, so a little bit too not. It does get a little iffy when it comes to talking specifics of what might specifically happen. It does get a little iffy, but the signal is there, so we will be watching for anything that does try to happen. Other than that, really quickly, do want to mention for those that have not watched it yet, I've released my 2023 qualitative discussion this past Wednesday. So if you want to go ahead check that out, would really appreciate it if you do, and of course if you share that as well. Let me know what you think in the comments, and also if you did like it, especially share with other people so we can just get more people to watch it. But other than that, that's it for today's discussion. If you like what you saw today, as I always say, please subscribe, ring the notification bell, do all that good stuff, and help grow this channel and help grow this community, which is what I'm here to do for, and which is what I'm here to do for hurricane tracking as well, which is why I'm here. So please, if you really want to follow this channel and be with us, I would really appreciate it if you go ahead and subscribe and share this video with family and friends, of course, as well, which is another thing you could do. But other than that, that's everything I have for today. Stay safe, have a great rest of your weekend, and stay safe, of course, and we will talk again next Saturday. See ya.